Hello.
Sonia.
How are you?
Good to see you.
Where are we now?
I'm Matheus Pereira. I'm here with Sonia Nava. She's a costume designer, member of the CDG, the Costume Design Guild. We've met in San Diego. I've talked to the other ladies and the other costume designers. They asked me, "Oh, who's your costume design team?" And I said, "Well, I have my costume design team is Wallix. So I would like to introduce you to Wallix right here on this call. He is my costume design team, my art department."
Wallix, nice to meet you.
Okay. Hi, nice to meet you, Sonia.
I didn't get much time, in general, to get to know anything about your company aside from your Instagram and your website. Yeah. I love the idea of anything as an international collaboration because my background is basically 25 years of working in Italy, in the UK, in Spain, and Switzerland. I've been very fortunate to live. I've lived in Romania, where I've worked on commercials and I've worked on publications. So anything that brings the world tighter is always, to me, a very exciting process, because I think we get stuck in our bubble of where we live and only work. And that's one problem I'm having with the union, because I've just joined the union. Yes. And I'm finding it a struggle because I'm used to being an independent contractor where I can just do absolutely anything. And now anything I do, I'm close with the vice president of the union. She did say, you can take things that are unions, just let us know and why you're doing it. But it's something I'm not used to.
In Brazil, we have everything really independent, and we kind of mix the functions and the jobs because, we don't have that value in our country, because Hollywood is Hollywood. It's the industry standards. They set the rules. Everything is really, really strict because of the unions. So in our productions in Brazil, we let's make a movie. Okay, you want to join? You want to be the sound guy? You want to be the costume designer? Sure, I'd love to. It's just a bunch of friends and people that love the craft working together to make something really special. That was the case on the trailer that I sent you. That was our main feature film that we spent the whole year producing. It's a live action of that comic book, and Wallix had the challenge of translating those quotes from comic book page to live action. The first question that we would like to introduce: what is costume design and fashion to you? And do you remember the first moment in your life where you actually were, with a piece of paper drawing something, and that was the first hint that led you to this job?
What is it to me? Well, because a big chunk of my initial introduction was in fashion. Fashion to me is not always timeless. Fashion has a tendency of being a little mimicked and used as an expression, but not necessarily as a story to be told, right? So fashion is individual. Fashion is how, if you know that cargo pants are back in, then you're going to wear your version of those cargo pants. Now, some people like to mimic exactly what they see, and others like to take their own take on it, right? So fashion is really just utilizing a trend that you apply to your own specific personal style, or to a photo shoot, an editorial, an ad campaign. I've worked on a lot of ad campaigns that are fashion oriented. But then again, when you do a fashion advertising campaign, who is your target market? Who is your audience? How much is this product going to sell for? So then your fashion sense is limited, because then you have to be like, okay, this is for 18 to 22-year-old. This is supposed to be $30. How are we going to put this in an ad? We can't make it look too unapproachable. We can't make it look too old-fashioned, right? So fashion is very much about, I think, a business as well, right? It's about selling and expression. However, costume is exactly as you know it to be. It's part of the storytelling. It's working with the director, the writer as well, because a lot of the times I do work specifically with the writer before and the director to understand the different variations of how they want their characters to be interpreted by the audience. So they really don't even coincide. to be honest, to me. However, my fashion background has helped me in understanding and offering things to a director or a team of producers a different perspective, because I think having a fashion background allows you to see so many more things that many people don't see. And having lived in Milan for 10 years and having lived in London for 10 years, and I was trained by Hachette in Paris, I was trained by Elle magazine, I have a very keen international fashion eye. So I could tell you, okay, let's use this for the cover of a magazine in Singapore. Let's use this in a cover for a magazine in London, because every country has a different interpretation, right? That has contributed to my fashion, to my costume designing, but also being Mexican American. I am a Californian, raised by two parents from Mexico. And I've always had this sort of appreciation for pop Mexican fashion. And I was sort of many times detoured because it was gang related, this sort of like cholo style. But it was a way for me that I felt, wow, they're expressing themselves. They are individually trying to say, okay, I am Hispanic, I am Latin. And I really appreciated that sort of expression through clothes. So, having that background and then having lived in the countries that I've lived abroad, and also having two kids inspire me. My children are both in their 20s, and, you can't ignore what the new audience is looking for. London really helps me keep my finger on the pulse, because London is very progressive. And young designers will start in London before they go mass, or they'll start in little areas of New York that before they go mass into the bigger markets. I feel that every place I've lived has contributed to my interpretation of fashion and then my interpretation of costume. When I was trained by Elle in Paris, I remember showing up. I had done a shoot in Romania, and I had to present it to the very traditional Elle editors. She was probably she was about 74 at the time. She'd been in Elle since she was 20. And I had to have her approve my editorial before it got published into Elle Romania. And I took 2 editorials, and I was so nervous, but so excited, so proud of these editorials. And when I understood how well she knew what it meant to create an editorial, she looked at one shoot and she said, "This is not Elle, this is shit." And I knew then, okay, this is what I want to be. Because I felt at that point, this is a secret little world. These people know things that I don't know. And, here I think I've nailed it with these 2 photo shoots. And I had to go back to Romania and redo 2 more shoots that were according to the profile Elle oriented. So I think it was my unawareness that made me feel like, okay, this is where I want to be. Have you ever felt that? Where you're like, wait a second,
Wow.
I don't know this, but I want to know this.
Yes.
And it became a sort of like pool of, I want to be part of those people that know, that have their finger on the pulse and understand what it means to be an Elle editor. I became an Elle fashion director at that time. So that was probably my first time when it came to fashion.
I just gotta mention that I'm a huge fan of. I'm not into the fashion area, but for some reason I'm very drawn and I love the content on the channels. I love the videos. I love how the fashion extends visually to the videos and everything. Elle magazine was one of the.
It's very specific. It's very, very specific. They're very concise. They're very consistent. When you see an editorial, there is a story within a visual story. It doesn't have to be an actual story, but it isn't like, there are a lot of publications that do great editorials, but suddenly you're like, this picture does not make sense with this photo. And I think Elle really taught me an understanding of how to not confuse your reader.
Which stage is more difficult when it comes to create a concept for a design for a movie that you have to make a custom?
Which is more difficult? Difficult. I don't ever see as a difficult. I think it's more challenging, where you have to meet more standards okay, the beginning process obviously can be challenging because you have to get everyone to like what you're offering, right? So not just the director and the writer, but many times the actor. And sometimes the DOP, which a lot of people don't really talk about, is the director of photography. If they're really close with the director, they will sit on some of these meetings and look at some of these costumes because they know how they're going to light it. They know how they're going to frame it. And a director might have, oh yeah, that looks great on that actress, but the director will know how it will look in that situation. To always find the most challenging, I wouldn't say difficult, is making sure everyone is happy. The people that matter, which are the writer, the director, and maybe the DOP, and obviously the actor. Half the time, the actor, depending on, let's be honest, depending how relevant the actor is, right? If the actor has a voice, if it's a well-known actor, actress, for example. I've been in situations where I was lucky enough to work on the trailer of No Way Home with I don't know if you know Tom Hardy, right? From Venom, obviously. And
yes.
And I had to pick out some hats because he was supposed to be on a resort in Mexico. And we tried like Mexican soccer team hats. We tried all these different hats. But he had to feel that he could be that role. So it had a lot to do with not just what John Watts wanted, but it had a lot to do with what Tom wanted. And then it had to match the environment. It couldn't stand out too much because it looked like this Mexican resort bar. So, it's a matter, the challenge is getting everyone to agree, then when executes it. And then the hardest part, honestly, guys, is the wrap. Is when you have to like take everything back as you received them. So if you rent pieces and you've broken them down, like I've worked on a lot of World War I and World War II, is returning them in a place where the supplier is happy enough to say, okay, I will have you rent from me again. Or the budget. No one talks about that. Is probably for me the most difficult. The budget. How much are we going to allocate to the principals? How much are we going to allocate to the crowd? How much do we have? To be honest, I would say definitely the budget. And that's why you have costume supervisors. So how it works here is a costume supervisor will handle anything that has to do with the logistics and obviously the budget, allowing the costume designer, assistant costume designer to do the other work. However, we still have to be very conscious of, if we like a fabric that we want to have something made, we have to make sure that it's within our budget guidelines. So I think, people think, oh, you dream up these great ideas and you can create anything you want, but there's always a budget, no matter how large a production is. There's always pennies to be counted and everything has to be, particularly watched, especially now, costumes, things are just a lot more expensive than they used to be. Especially like rentals, things have gone up significantly. That's why I'm quite fortunate. I have a lot of resources in Italy. I did a shopping for an Al Pacino film, which is called Lear Rex, which is coming out. We're going to start filming next week. Lear Rex is King Lear. Al Pacino plays King Lear. Jessica Chastain will be playing one of the daughters. And I went to Rome and because I have resources with the top 5 houses, which are the most historical hire houses. So imagine seeing Elizabeth Taylor's costume from Cleopatra. So these are original houses of hire, right? So you don't have just one source. If you have contacts, it's great to have an international source of suppliers. So I have Italy and I have the UK and I have the US.
How does the collaborative process on the middle of a bunch of people work? How much do you work directly to the director? How much do you work directly to the actor? I imagine Tom Hardy saying, oh man, I don't like this cap. So how many people does his opinion goes through to get to a final? Is it yours? Is it the director?
No, it's John. Him and John have to like it at that point. Yeah.
Yes.
I was asked to, because I live in London as well, and they had to do a scene that was the trailer, the credits trailer. When it's the end of the film.
Yeah, the post-credits scene. Yeah,
exactly. And so the costume itself had already been given by the costume designer that had filmed the No Way Home. I had to source a hat. And I had to source Christo, who was the bartender. As you know, you recognize him. He's from Ted Lasso.
Oh yes.
Yeah. And Christo is from Mexico City, who we completely hit it off, and I now call him a friend. He's just the most kindest person ever. He's a very well trained actor. And it was first John Watts had to agree on what I liked. Now, he didn't ask Christou if Christou liked it, but he asked Tom if Tom liked his hat, obviously, right? So,
Yeah.
yes. So it depends on the level of actor, right? But it's usually between the actor and the director.
You picked Tom Hardy's hat on the post-credit scene, right? You were
Yes.
the one who specifically. Literally, hats off to you, because I'm a huge fan of caps and hats all the time wearing. So how would you rate my cap? Because it's
I
really
love your
important.
cap. So broken down. Yeah.
It's really important to me, and I would like to know if it's not fashion enough. I have a blue version of it as well, so
Cool.
I just love it. I just love the
I'm
caps.
gonna go tell you a quick story. I did a short film called Buscando Elma, and I had went shopping at Western in Los Angeles for broken down caps like that, and it was very similar. Such a cool hat. Went missing. Found out the extra took it home. And Western was going to charge me $270 to replace it. The more broken down a hat is, the more of a story it tells, the more expensive it is.
Oh yeah.
Nobody wants a new hat anymore. Baseball hat. You know, you want the fraying, you want the story there, and it's just a little more. It's more personality. It's more individual, right?
The hat you picked for Tom Hardy already became iconic because I thought it was his. I thought it was his hat because he was always posting it. When they got back to Venom 3 and everything, and he was posting on social media. I think this guy's just wearing his clothes, and I think that's like good job because it feels his. You know, it feels like the right one.
Well, how it happened is I must have picked. I have probably a photo. I'll have to send you a photo of all the different hats that we chose. And he liked them, but they were too new looking. And then there was a stack of hats that had come from Los Angeles. So that was in his stack. I think they were hoping we could use something that was football driven, that had a bit of a, we say obviously football, but soccer. You guys say football. And that was my objective. And I think I bought probably 20 football hats from Mexico, and they weren't good enough. So
just for that specific scene.
So we went back to the archive. So it was not like that. I mean, I know you can find that on eBay and Amazon, that hat, but but it was in a pile that was like, okay, let's just stick to this one then.
Yes. And that's, I know it might sound silly. We're talking about, 20 minutes talking about a hat here, but that tells a lot on how detailed and passionate is the process on costume design. And
even the shirt. I mean, the bartender's shirt, I had about 30 shirts, and it had to be according to what did the director think was going to look more realistic? What looked more Mexican? What looked better on him behind that bar with the background, and what looked more like a high-end resort? So yeah, I mean, it's more than just what the director and the actor wants. It's also, at the end of the day, what looks the best, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And
the director is actually the one who's going to define that at the end.
Oh yeah,
so.
It's really underappreciated. Kind of the jobs that people see on screen. They're a huge fan of what they see, but they don't know who did it. And I think it's a fantastic and it's really interesting part of the craft and the whole filmmaking. It's what composes the film visually, and so that's why we wanted to talk to you, because it's really important to what we do in filmmaking, and that's why we're trying to bring to our culture in Brazil and in our productions. Your transition to the Guild, you worked in fashion, and how was the jumping point to the Guild?
Well, after living and working in fashion in Switzerland and Italy, I moved to the UK because my daughter got a scholarship to study. So I lived, the moment I got to the UK, I started working in music, and I was working with a music company, Platoon, owned by Apple, consulting new artists on how to curate their look as their new career began. So I was working with bands, and I realized that, okay, this is going to have an expiration date. I would really like to work on a film. I literally just told one friend who happened to know a producer, and she'd seen my profile, and she asked me if I would work, which was the biggest break ever. It was a film called AKA Nadia, and I don't know if you know who John Hurt is, but John Hurt is an iconic actor who needed his own costumer, and he needed me to shop for his role in the film. And then I ended up shopping for 50 people. It one thing led to another. This was an example of what would not happen in the States. Because in the US, you have to be a member of 705 to actually dress actors, right? If you're a member of the Guild, you are a designer or assistant costume designer. You are not a costumer. In order to be a costumer, you should join also the 705. So there is, you do have those, barriers that you have to, or basically, you have to be a member of both unions to be on both parts. Otherwise, if you're a costume designer only in 892, you have to depend on costumers to dress the actors or to be on set or even to break down the clothes. I cannot break down clothes right now. In the UK, I can. So when I was asked to work with John Hurt, we were filming in Liverpool. He asked me to go to his hotel. I knew the scene. I'd read the scene over and over again based on his character, obviously read the script over and over again, showed up his hotel with about 10 different looks. And I was so nervous because he, to me, is one of the biggest icons. I mean, to be welcomed and asked, okay, let's do a fitting by ourselves. This would not happen in the States, that I would go and fit the actor with my choices. And had the best time. And by the time I knew it, the producer and the director was like, we'd really like to have you for the entire UK production. Can you dress the army? Can you dress the rebels? Can you dress? And by the time I knew it, I was full force on that. But I have to say that was probably one of the best experiences, having him try a shirt on and look in the mirror and then literally get into character. Like he would sort of shake his body and then he'd look in the mirror and then he'd say a line and he'd be like, no, not this one. Then he would get another. And at the end of the day, it was the first shirt that was a pink shirt. And you can see it on my trailer. I think I have it on the trailer. It's on the AKA Nadia trailer. And he knew, he's like, this is it. Trousers, jacket. It was one of the, and that was my introduction. And once I was on that first film job, there was no going back.
Fantastic.
Because I felt like this is something where I feel there's also a leave behind. In fashion, there isn't a leave behind. There's no legacy. You can't look up a photo shoot or a campaign, and find it on YouTube and be moved by it. And that's what's great about storytelling through film, is there's always a leave behind. You can always look back at it. And there's something really beautiful about that.
My last question to you, what is your advice to aspiring costume designers? I don't know if there's any present here at the moment. But what is your advice to aspiring costume designers to that wants to do what you do?
I think the most important thing is to understand, because a lot of people from the outside think, oh, it's so glamorous. Oh, that's so cool. You dress actors. But at the end of the day, it's really understanding what the role is about. It's really understanding that it's a script that someone has written that you need to help bring to life through wardrobe and through a visual impression. And not to get sidetracked with, the cool factor of it all. Oh, yes, dressing actors sounds so cool. And at the end of the day, it's more about being part of telling the story through sometimes things that we don't necessarily agree with. We might not like the look of something, being okay with that. Because, when I was a fashion editor, and a fashion director, I had to like it. It wasn't going to be photographed if I didn't like it. It wasn't about what the model said. It wasn't what the photographer said. So when you're working in a film project where you have all these different levels of opinions, it's being able to understand, okay, this is not about me. And costume designers sometimes think it's a platform to show their vision. No, it's to help execute the director's and writer's vision.
They say like it's not your movie, right? And
exactly.
They say in all areas, if you are like in any part of the craft, it's not your movie. How much of The Devil Wears Prada is present? How much is it like that?
It depends on the country, and I think it depends on the publication. I'm sure a lot of it could apply, and a lot of times it doesn't apply. Yes. You take that film took different aspects, obviously, of stories from the U.S. and probably a little bit from France. So I think it's not as much anymore. I think there's a lot less of that now, as you can imagine with how things have changed. People are more outspoken. If you get mistreated, it's going to go on social media.
Yes.
So it's a different world now. But yeah, a little bit of everywhere has that, but I don't think as much anymore.
Sonia, thank you very much for your time. It was a wonderful interview. I think this our point is to inspire, people around our country, our friends, and people who have, curiosity on how does it work on the industry, on the mainstream media. And we would
let me add something for the inspiration that I'd like to give to the young people is, if whenever you have free time, look at as many old films, old music clips, anything that has imagery. Feed your own personal.
I'm so sorry, Sonia. You tapped your microphone just when the climax of your speech. You tapped your microphone.
Yeah.
There's so much access out there that utilize it. Take advantage of it, whether it's through YouTube, there's through platforms. Feed yourself as much information visually that will then feed to how you drive the direction of what you want to do as a costumer.
Alex, say your goodbyes.
Thank you, Sonia.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.